Danish, sorry, there we go. Why is Danish so freaking important when you are looking for a job in Denmark? Because it's like, hey, you can just find a company where you don't need Danish because the English proficiency in Denmark is really high. So that is possible. And it is possible. But it's something where it's like you're going to give yourself a way better chance of finding somewhere if you are learning Danish. And the reason I wanted to bring this up in one of these live videos is that I was just attending Copenhagen Capacity. They made a survey about internationals, and they were presenting that yesterday. And one of the things they were asking was like, what was important in terms of you staying or leaving. And like one of the things that they realized was that a lot of the internationals who left had not valued learning Danish. And then on the other hand, some of the reason they left was that they didn't feel like they fit in the company, or it was hard to get a job, and all of these things. And what it seems that unfortunately a lot of internationals don't realize that even the English profession, even though the English wow, even though the English proficiency, yeah, in Denmark is really high, um, learning Danish can be very, very valuable in the job search and in whether you feel like you belong, even when you have a job. Like being able to chit chat with the at the coffee machine, or just understand the Danes chit chatting, so you don't like feel constantly left out of everything, is super, super important. And I really think that there is this mismatch between how important people think it is and how much value it will actually bring if you learn Danish. I was at I had a speaking engagement at a university and talking to all of these postdocs, and one of them actually said it really, really well as well, was that it's also about understanding all of the small nuances of what's happening. So one thing, going to the grocery shop and like going, having meetings and all that, but it's also about understanding the culture. And like there's so many things that will be so much easier if you know the language, the Danish humor. And I'm like, I don't know, I'm missing the word right now, but these nuances that really helps you to understand Danes better. We were talking about at the same event how we can be super direct as Danes. And that really doesn't matter whether we're speaking Danish or English, I'm guessing, but or well, it doesn't. But the point being that if you know Danish and you kind of get to know more of the culture as well in that process, you know that it's also more a question of efficiency a lot of the time. Like it's way easier to just say things as they are than it is to kind of beat around the bush with it, and like having to um say different things or make excuses. Or I can't even come up with some good examples here because it's so natural for me to just like say things as they are. So by knowing the language, you will get, that will make more sense. Does that make sense? It's one of those days. It's been some long days. I've attended some really, really interesting events the past 2 days, and it's been so, so interesting. One of the things, I unfortunately had to leave for one of them today because I got a massive headache. That happens, right? But one of the things we talked about was belonging, and this was with the organization Nabo, who had this event, and the theme was kind of belonging, right? And I had this really interesting conversation with um, another, well, a third culture kid. She was not a kid anymore, but she was like a third culture person. I don't know. They call themselves third culture kids. Um, and the point being that she had not grown up in Denmark, but she Danish relatives, right? And moved to Denmark. And we got to talking about the whole feeling of belonging. This is a bit off topic for language, but I still think that it combines well. And I might talk about this in another video as well later. But the whole point of like belonging is also about, there's so many aspects to belonging, by the way, to feel like you're belonging. But the thought that, or the thing that we chatted about was belonging in terms of um belonging to yourself, like feeling like being yourself, and um kind of standing in yourself and feel that like, okay, so if I can feel like that I belong with myself first, then I can go out and like figure out how I belong in society and in a new culture. And I think that's just super um super valuable, because figuring out where you belong is so important. But you will never, in my opinion, it's going to be really hard, at least, to really feel like you belong in any culture if you don't belong with yourself first. One of the things that we were also talking about, for me as being a Dane, right, and Danes in general, we don't necessarily feel like we belong either. So, and I know it's like even harder with that extra layer of being international. But I just think that the core thing is to figure out your own values and figure out how you belong with yourself first, and then move on to how do I then belong. And you can probably do both simultaneously, but I just think that a lot of times we don't think about the self-belonging part. We're just pushing it out and thinking about the belonging in society, the belonging in a new culture, like feeling that belonging, and sometimes also pushing the responsibility away from ourselves. And I'm not saying that everyone and happens all the time, but I know that it happens sometimes. And then it becomes, whether it's Denmark or some other country, end up kind of giving the culture, or not the culture, but the people and the country, um, like blaming them for not creating opportunities for you to belong. But again, it's also about figuring out, what does that mean to you? What is, do you belong to yourself? And then go from there. And I've talked about this before with values and culture, and kind of figuring out, because when you have your culture, you can change that, but the values you can't. So figuring out the belonging in relation to the values, and then you can change the cultural part. So if we go back to language, that, and then taking like, that's an outside factor, right? But starting to also be okay to ask for help, and be okay to ask people to say, hey, would you mind speaking English with me today, because, or Danish with me today, because I really want to train this. And there's a point here I think is really important that we also touched upon, is that a lot of people learning language, and I totally understand that, will feel dumber in the new language. So they feel like learning Danish, and it would be the same if I'm learning, I don't know, German or Italian or something, because I don't have the same vocabulary available to me, and because I don't like I don't know the culture, I don't know the all these things, I'm gonna feel not as smart in that language as I do in Danish or even English, because I speak so much English, so it doesn't really matter. But what I'm trying to say is that you are not, I know that there's stuff you can't articulate as you're learning a language, but instead of thinking about yourself as being not as smart, think about you're as smart, but actually you're getting smarter and smarter the more you learn this new language. So instead of putting yourself down, when you are speaking this new language, then remember to praise yourself for learning and getting smarter and smarter as you learn this new language, because it's going to help you so much. And even if you're not planning on staying, I know a lot of people will come here not planning on staying, and then they'll end up staying anyways, and then it's kind of a shame not having learned the language. So you might as well start learning. And in Denmark you can get Danish language lessons from the municipality for free the first 5 years you're here, right? So there's not really a reason not to learn. um so but I think again the really important part is also about the cultural aspects, and that thing that's getting the nuances of the conversation, of the culture, and really feeling like you're learning to fit in. And that's going to come with the culture and with the language as well. I hope this makes sense. Let me know in the comments, like, how are you getting along learning Danish? Are you already in Denmark, or are you not in Denmark yet? And if you're not, I very much encourage you to learn Danish. If you're looking for a network in Denmark, reach out. I have discovery calls where we can have a chat and see if we can work together, and if I can help you with your job search, finding your next job in Denmark. But yeah, remember, language, 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 and I promise you I will speak English with you, because it's also a question about knowing, when are we speaking Danish, when are we speaking English? Because when it's in a setting um where learning the language is not the most important thing, then for the sake of actually learning stuff, then I always keep my teaching in English, because it's like none of us is going to get something positive out of, really, like, or we're not going to get the same value of if we take a session in Danish versus taking in a session in English. I'll do fine in Danish, right? But you will maybe stumble along, and you'll get more from us doing our sessions in English, and then go out and train the Danish with other places, train the Danish, ask for, like, buy a coffee in Danish, or find someone where you actually switch languages. There's a lot of, like, um or a lot, there are opportunities to swap languages. So if you're Italian, you can swap with someone, with a Dane who wants to learn Italian, so you're kind of learning each other's languages. It's a really good way of learning as well. But also, like I said, municipalities have great options for you to learn the language. But yeah, and no matter whether it's Denmark or Germany or somewhere else, it doesn't really matter. I think that it's also a sign of respect and interest in saying, I'm actually here because I'm interested in you guys and the culture and all of that. So learning the language of the country you decide to live in, I think is a really, really good idea. And it's going to help you in so many ways. And I do run into, once in a while, I do run into internationals who are like, hey, I have learned the language and I still can't get a job, and it's been horrible. And I'm always like, it's not a given that you'll get a job just because you know Danish, but it's an added benefit. It means that you're more likely to get a job, but you are not promised a job. And if the fact that you know Danish, or are well on your way to knowing Danish, and you're still not getting a job, then there's other things to work on, right? So then you might get better at writing your material, you might be better at networking, you might be better at interviewing, all of those different things. And if you're struggling with that and you want to work on that, reach out to me. That's also what I work with my clients on, training all of these things. So networking, but also job search in general. If you have any questions about language, about anything, let me know in the chat, and I will get back to you. Now I am gonna go and get some sleep. So have an amazing, amazing day whenever you're watching this. I'm doing this live. So I will see you for the next live tomorrow. I have no idea. I think we're on day 22 or 23 of the 30-day live challenge. So if you have a topic you would like for me to cover, you're also very welcome to write it in the chat. Have an amazing, amazing evening, day, wherever you are. Bye.